And then she said, "You can do whatever you want with me, sir. I want to be ravaged. But when I go in for the kill, she grabs me, slaps me, and tells me no before rushing off in a huff." There was a round of laughter that came from the bustle of men sitting at a tavern's table having drinks. Jack was amongst them, and though he was the youngest of the group of work colleagues, he still found them to be good company. They were celebrating one of the Min's day just before his wedding. Having drinks all night and getting completely hammered was their mission that night. There was jokes about wives and the married life of Min. They had a way of making it seem more strenuous than it actually is, believed by Jack. He felt that he would have made a great husband. Now it was his turn to tell a tale of troubled love life. "What do you got for us, Jack? Any hot stories you want to share with us? We know you got some stored in your closet of secret, heh. Yeah, knowing Jack, I'm sure he's got plenty of them. He's got the looks, charm and money, all three things women love. So spill the beans already, Jack." "Yeah, lay one on us." "Not literally, of course." They all laugh. They were all extremely intoxicated, with slurred words and unstable balance. It was a wonder how they managed to stay on their stools, let alone sit up straight. Jack hadn't had that much to drink, just enough for the sensational buzz to kick in and numb his tongue on silver gin. Jack was busting his gut with laughter along with his drinking buddies because all of what they said was true. Yes, he was good with the ladies, and yes, he did have a gift of the tongue that could and would entice any female out there, be they diminutive or as large as a toro. But he had met his match when along came her. A simple Vulcan living in a big city had swept him off his feet without her ever really trying. For the first time, Jack honestly felt that he deeply cared for this woman and would give himself completely to her alone. When the men all calmed from this bolstering laughter, Jack would begin his story. "Well, I met this broad sum a month ago. She and I have been engaged in this love affair for some time now, and now we're ready to get. Come on, Jack, you're a grown man. Just say it already. You're looking to buck, aren't you?" Another round of laughter hollered out and crowded the otherwise empty tavern. "You waited that long to buck, all men. It's not like that. This one's special. For you to wait that long, I imagine. Wait a min, did you say love affair? Like she's seeing someone already? Jack, are you trying to be a home wrecker on top of being a player? No, nothing like that. Wait, she ain't the same Vulcan broad that's married to the red toro named Maxton, is she?" "Yay, there isn't many Vulcan around here in the city. It's got to be her." The eldest of his drinking buddies finally spoke up. "You be careful with that one, Jack. Maxton is a bomb waiting to explode, and that no-good wife of his is prone to wandering. Yay, the last time she wandered off to be with another min, Maxton took his axe to the guy's face. Cleaved it clean off. The officials couldn't make heads or tails as to who the min previously was before he angered the Mad King. I don't know, that could be you. Jack, you keep messing with this girl." Jack nervously laughed in his drink and cleared his burning throat after the gulp. He was familiar with Maxton's tendency to lose his temper. He and the wife had been caught by the toro before. Needless to say, he got off lucky, for the gods were looking out for him that day. "You don't have to worry about me. Sylvia and I have been extra car." Suddenly, Jack paused in his sentence, his face frozen with shocking realization. The glass in his hand slipped out of his weakened grip and shattered on the floor. Jack watched as the liquid inside of the short glass swirl as its container was falling, then the inevitable break where the shine of the glass multiplied by the millions. It was beautiful, Jack thought, while the entire world seemed to be in slow motion. It was as if he were hit with something traumatic, and the only thing to cope with the sudden spring of memories was to focus on his ruined drink. All of the events that led up to this very moment came flooded back to Jack, and he then remembered exactly what happened to him. He seemed lost in his thoughts as he stared at the broken glass. So deep in his thoughts he was easily startled when he heard the voice of another booming in. "You remember, don't you? And here I thought I'd have to snatch you out of your daydream." Jack slowly looked up from the floor to see a tall, dark and cloaked being standing there. He was shrouded in mystery as his face seemed void, completely missing. He wore elegant-looking robes of blue with intricate golden patterns woven into them. After the initial scare, Jack didn't seem too surprised to see the figure, for he knew just who he was. Everyone knew who he was. "I'm dead, aren't I?" Jack quietly gathered, eyebrows furrowed. He got up from his tavern stool over to the cloaked figure known as Noctis. Noctis nodded to him, and for a brief moment the two shared a small moment of silence between each other that harboured some sort of grim acceptance to the end of Jack's fate. "Will you be taking me to the afterlife now?" Noctis shook his hooded head and responded in his raspy, whispering tone, "Not quite yet." Jack looked confused at the statement. "Well, if you're not taking me yet, then what are we doing?" "I want to show you what your lover's been up to during your finals days amongst the living." "Why would you do that for me?" "I do it for all that is worthy." With a mighty wave of his arm, Noctis wrapped Jack inside of the sleeve of the robe, and Jack could see no longer. This induced a panic through Jack, who demanded that he be released on impulse. When his vision was revealed, he realized that he was suddenly standing in the bedroom of his apartment. Before his very eyes, he could see the aftermath of the events that led to his death. There sat a Vulcan woman. She was crying and seemed hysterical. Behind her stood a large red taureau with a bloody axe gripped tightly in his left hand. And there in the bed lay a lifeless body, its head missing. There is a lot of blood splattered everywhere, including on the screaming woman's face, her eyes wide and claws touching everywhere at her red-painted face. She turns this way and that and tries to flee out of the window, but the large taureau stops her with a grab of her slim arm and pulls her into him, hugging at her, saying something along the lines of, "This is your mess too." This act seems to calm the woman, whose manic screaming turns into somber sobs of acceptance. The official arrived shortly after and began to investigate the bloody scene. They question the pair, who answer truthfully about what happened and how the taureau came to the conclusion of committing murder on another. The red taureau, named Maxton, explains how he planned to kill Jack from the day he found him with his wife. He went on to emphasize that the Vulcan woman named Sylvia had nothing to do with it. The officials looked to one another, as if trying to assess the situation the best they could before they would arrest the taureau for predetermined murder. An officer would stay behind to question Sylvia more before he would let her go home. Jack writhed in silence the entire thing. It was like watching a play at the theatres he loved to take Sylvia with to enjoy. Now it all left a bitter taste inside of him. When it was over, he looked to Noctis again and shrugged a shoulder. "I'm glad Sylvia was all right and did not take the fall for something that I caused. So that's it then?" No. The Vulcan woman exists the apartment home where the gruesome scene took place and began walking down the street to the right. Now, why would a woman of her reputation and lithe build want to go anywhere with the sun going down? The streets of New Yorleng were notorious for harbouring danger that lurked in the dark of the night. The question lingers long after the woman enters a red building, looking around before she shuts the door. Inside, through the windows, she is seen walking up a flight of stairs to a room. She knocks on the door before entering. Seeing through the next window, she enters into another room. The room itself is lit a blood red and emits smoke that slowly wafts out the caged open window. Inside of the room sits an Alicot. She is small, and her bestial features show a royal blue. Her eyes are big and purple. Like gems, they shine in the light of the street lights outside of the building. The Alicot smokes from a pipe and welcomed the Vulcan to sit on the pillow before her. The Vulcan takes the offer, hands to her chest. Words are exchanged between the two before the Alicot is seen leaning into the Vulcan. She presses her ear against the stomach of the Vulcan woman and stills. She then leans up and puffs on her pipe. Bellowing out smoke, she simply says in a raspy voice, "He still lives on." The Vulcan woman suddenly bursts into tears, but unlike before in his apartment, she smiled as she cried in her hands. She was so overjoyed that she did not hear the foreboding warning of the Alicot hooded in silk. "Heed my words, Sylvia. You will get your lover back, but it will all be for a cost." Regardless of the warning, Sylvia held a look of determination in her face. The two continued to talk on for hours before the Alicot would abruptly cough and handed Sylvia some items in a bag. Sylvia bowed to the Alicot and retreated from the room. Once she was on the ground level, she took off down the street once more. Jack shook his head, confused. I don't understand. What is she up to? Noctis only looked at Jack before he would wave his arm again and cloak Jack in darkness. When it was all clear, Jack was now standing at the foot of the city branch's cemetery. There was Sylvia. She was knelt down before a gravestone. The gravestone held the name Jack Willows with words of love, possibly said by Sylvia herself at the funeral. She cried and she cried, mumbling something about how she missed Jack so much and blamed herself for his murder. What seemed like hours of her grieving was then put on pause as she then perked up, her Vulcan ears upright and alert. She seemed to be listening for something, or perhaps felt something. Putting it aside, she would then collect some assorted items she pours out from a bag and arrange them in a particular way. Once that was done, she began to draw something along the ground with white chalk. She circled her lover's tombstone and scribbled something in the dirt. It took minutes before she stood up and backed away. Afterwards, she began to chant and dance around the tombstone like a drunk woman in delirium. She danced and twirled and giggled and laughed. It was quite unsettling to see the breaking of someone's mind, and yet beautiful at the same time. The Vulcan woman then drops to her knees before the tombstone, her head bowed and hands planted in the ground. She claws at the still, soft soil and cups the land in her small hands, letting them fall all over her being. She smears the dirt down her face, next, and along the boxum of her breasts. As she does this, she hums to herself and mumbles words of incoherence, all the while playing in the dirt and absolutely smothering herself in the soil. The odd display almost hindered on the cuffs of madness, but the emotional ride was soon over when the Vulcan woman bowed her body over the burial ground once more. She seemed to be waiting for something to happen, but when that something did not occur, she began to sob once more. Her quiet crying echoed throughout the chilly cemetery. The only ambience one can hear would be the sounds of bug chirping and the occasional hooting of an owl. She was completely alone, which was mostly like she was crying. After a long moment, Sylvia gathered her items, stood to her feet and left the cemetery. She really did care for me. Love. It can be the most beautiful thing in the world and the most tragic. Jack looked into the portal's eye of the living. Whereas everything around him was robbed of its colour, this portal that he assumed was able to see into the realm of the living still held its vibrant colours. Even the cemetery held a sullen bleak blue that was reminiscent of a rainy day, whereas every place else was brighter, even with the receding sun. He suddenly felt cold and shivered. "I've seen enough. Take me away now." "You can't." Jack was snapped out of his brooding and slowly looked to Noctis with a look of suspicion. "I can't." "What?" "You can't move on to the afterlife." "What? Why?" "You are now, as they say, stuck in limbo." An exhale of disbelief left Jack, and for the first time he noticed that he could see his own breath. "You mean to tell me that I'm stuck here, between the living and the D?" The moment Jack looked down at himself, he realized that he lacked a physical form. Instead, what he saw was a massive writhing black. As he reached with his arms to touch at himself, tentacles like protrusions came forth. He opened his mouth to scream, but all that came out was a pained groan with the frequency similar to the grumbling of a large apex. Seeing what he had become, Jack desperately turned to Noctis for answers. "What is happening to me?" "Now that you have learned the truth, your body is simply taking on that truth." "Isn't there something you can do?" the gravelly voice pleaded. "I am afraid there is nothing I can do for you, Jack. You see." Noctis motions Jack to watch the rest of the events through the eye of the living after Sylvia had left the graveyard. There was a stir in the ground where Jack was buried. It was subtle but noticed. Suddenly an arm can be seen clawing through the dirt and reaching outward after the other arm claws its way out. They work hard together to pull the torso out of the ground. From there, the full body then pulls out its legs. It shakes as it desperately attempts to right itself. Like a newborn calf, it struggles for balance. After wobbling around a moment, it takes a firmer stand and shakes off the dirt and bugs that clung to it. It is deceased, but its stature makes it seem as though he still breathes. "Your life has been comprised. Watching his own body stumble around like that immediately reminded Jack of one of his drinking buddies and felt the need to vomit, but could not due to him not having a stomach anymore. The body walked on, struggling with each step until it straightened up again and took off running. Jack wasn't sure how his body was able to move, let alone run, but he knew where it was headed. Sylvia! She in danger! Alone in the woods sat a cottage. The cottage looked old-fashioned in contrast to the housing and building of the big city behind it. It was made of wood and painted an off-colour of white, and stood out from the forest it was nestled in with its dark greenery. It was now dark out, almost nearing twilight hours, yet something could be seen moving in the darkness. It was a figure with a large torso and wide shoulders. The shoulders held no head for this lumbering figure lurking in the dark. It was the body from the graveyard. The lumbering body clambered its way to the cottage and began to bang itself against the door, seemingly seeking entry. Knock! We have to do something! There is nothing we can do. There has to be something we can do. If that thing gets inside, it will kill her. Such is life prone to death. If that is her fate, so be it. I will not interfere with that. But you can, can't you? I can. Thinking for a split second was all Jack needed before he would plunge himself into the image portal and sprang into the realm of the living. Without hesitation, he ran straight for the body, throwing itself against the wooden door of Sylvia's home, and yanked it away with the use of his black, shadowy tendrils. They wrapped themselves around the limbs of the body and forcefully pulled it away from the door into the woods with such ferocity, the body was easily flung like a lightweight frame. Once the risen body was disposed of, the door swung open to reveal a confused and terrified Sylvia. She looked every which way to find who was at her door. She even called out Maxton's name, as if she believed he had somehow gotten out of incarceration and came after her for revenge. She never did see what exactly was at her doorstep, but she felt that she was in danger. With a shiver to her dainty body, she suddenly looked deeper into the darkened woods, and what she saw drained the colour of her face. There, standing in the woods, was the deformed being that was now Jack. He had been reduced to a lifeless form void of colour and any telling features to him. It was as if he were a shadow, but he still retained his bodily figure, that of a Min. So what Sylvia saw was a strange Min in all black, staring at her in the middle of the night. Perhaps he was the one banging at her door and trying to force his way in. The sight alone was enough to have Sylvia slamming the door shut and barred herself in with the locks and anything she could find to help barricade herself in. This was all right with Jack, so long as she was safe from the headless horror. His mind wandered away from Sylvia to his corporal body. It had already been standing up by the time he looked over and lumbering towards him. Taken aback by this, Jack had no idea how to react, so he initially took to a defensive pose, preparing for a fight with his own dead body, but Noctis would intervene before he could move. It seems that your body is trying to reconnect with your soul, that being this form you currently take on. If it were to do that, you would be whole. All of your memories will come back to you, however you will still be considered dead. None of this will be seen. It would be as if you never existed, with no memory of your memories. So I'll be back within the darkness. Jack Visible cringed in fear. Yes, if it were to even touch you, you will connect with it. I can't let that happen. Jack began to back away from his staggering body, which reached out with both hands for him. Despite it not having a head, it knew exactly where it was going, even when Jack would his backwards withdrawal from it. The strong, innate urge to reconnect with him was evident in the way it moved towards him. He could almost hear it groan in frustration. He had no intentions of getting his memories back, let alone die completely. He did not remember his life before he died, but he imagined that it was quite nice for him to have been with someone like Sylvia, thus deeming it too painful for him to bear. Despite him being a formless shadow, he much preferred it their way, for he still was able to see the world of the living and avoid the void of nothingness. It's what he feared the most in this world, that horrible blackness where nothing is nothing and everything is nothing. No memories, no thoughts, no sight, no movement, nothing. There is nothing but black. What makes it worse is that the consciousness is still there, so one sees the void, but that is all. All is the void, and that is a fate worse than death itself. My Sylvia is out there with my child. She is going to have to bear it alone. My son will grow up without a father. What kind of min am I? How could I have let this happen? You did not know, and yet still I can nothing. Jack watched as his body stagger over to him relentlessly, its arms still stretched out. Overcame with emotional wrath, Jack ripped the body away, using his tendrils once more. The initial contact was felt immediately, as one of his tendrils evidently pierced through the rotting flesh of the undead and inadvertently created a connection between the two life forms. Jack saw a sudden flash of light before his eyes, and another shiver coursed down his spine, shimmying his shoulders. There was a shared sense of knowing between Jack and his body, which seemed somewhat calmer, more sentient with its knowing. It didn't have live lungs, but the body's chest moved as if it were heaving heavily. It was as if it had been woken from a bad dream. The headless body calmly and quietly walked away from Jack and disappeared into the woods. Feeling as though there had been a conclusion, Jack breathed out a smoky sigh of relief and looked to Noctis, who asked, "Now what will ye do, Creptis?"